podcast that focuses on especially important things on the region, but also we want to just interview personalities who are of impact to both to South Sudan and also to the region. So maybe you can start by just telling us what's your name and what you do.
Okay, thank you, brother Nelson. I mean, first of all, thank you very much, and also welcome to the Embassy of South Sudan.
Mm.
You know, this is this is your embassy basically, and this is what we tell most people when they come to the embassy. Embassy are supposed to be, the core mandate is to help and assist nationals in diaspora. So I'm seated here, you know, as an ambassador, representing the government of South Sudan and the president in this case. But I'm seated here because of someone that put his or her life online to make South Sudan a country. It's a free country as we are now. So some of us could, you know, in a way you'd be some sort of privilege because you manage, you live, you survive to see the flag of South Sudan being hoisted. But always we think about those who made it possible for us to be seated where we are sitting. And that's why sometimes we feel, you know, passionate when you are dealing with South Sudanese cases, when there are citizens that are under stress here. You find yourself obliged because this is the least you can do to the people and to the government and to the land as South Sudan being an independent country, that you need to support the people because you compare what you are going through, the work you are doing, whether you stay up to midnight to assist a South Sudanese national. When you compare that against somebody who have, you know, and marked graved somewhere, you will find yourself much better. So the least you can do is just to keep on work to assist.
So this idea of always comparing, always looking into like the giants who have kind of laid the foundation for this nation and the people, usually that gives you the motive.
Serve as a motive.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Tell me about yourself. You are an ambassador now. Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
Well, you know, it always says life takes you anywhere. It's basically, some of us never thought one day you'd be an ambassador or even a diplomat because it wasn't really the thinking at the time. Because I grew up at a young chief, my father being a chief, paramount chief of the Luo tribe in Awil. I technically grew up in the court as a young man. So I would be sitting with my dad behind the chair and listening to cases. You wouldn't understand them because people speak deep, you know, references.
So this is when you talk about the court. This is the traditional court by the
traditional court. Yeah.
And were these kind of the only or the one of the most prominent instrument of administering justice and fairness?
Yes. It's very powerful. Very powerful. I remember my dad used to bring the whole village with just a stick. You don't use guns actually at that time because, you know, you would, when there is a conflict between sections and then the report comes that, you know, people have been fighting or there is a tension that would potentially lead to problems, he would just send a bazinga. Police would an armed police. Those who were actually, they were trained of course in town, they were assigned to chiefs in the village. So someone would go just with a stick because they know it's a stick used to carry some number, so they know what it is. This very distinctive one. They will know that's okay, that's the one of the chiefs.
So your dad will hand the stick to someone? To
someone and go, he said, and show the stick that, you know what, the chief wants everybody who is involved to come.
And the stick is a representation of him in that place?
And they will come.
And they will come as soon as they see that?
They will come.
So you grew up around this environment and you will sit behind his...
Behind the seats and then you listen the whole day. Sometimes you fall asleep, you will be taken away. So that kind of influenced my thinking into later on doing law. So when the war started, you know, coming to where I was born in a village called Barmayan, that's between Awil and Wau. When you're leaving Wau to Awil, it's just in the middle. It's 36 miles south of Awil, about 40-something miles north of Wau. But it's the main road connecting the two cities. But being in the northern part of it, you know, when the war started, I was in Wau. People started organizing to join the movement.
This we're talking about that's like 19. That's 83.
This is 1986.
86,
yeah.
So because the majority, the first conflict started around where? Around Bor?
Bor, but we had a Nyanya too. Even my late brother Ajongo, as you asked earlier, we were already in the bush now by that time. He was in 1882, he was already out in Nyanya too. Yeah. So there was already a movement.
There was already a movement, but now it intensified with the kind of the advent of the Sudan Liberation Movement now. And so the war starts. How old are you? What were you doing?
I was very young. This war started in 83. We were in intermediate. I was coming to the intermediate, and then the 1984-85 we set for students for intermediate certificate. We were going out to high school, and that was the time. Now it was like 3 years down the road after the SPLA started. Yeah. So I remember I can mention the name. One of the gentlemen, actually, is Brigadier Agok, who was the office manager, chief of staff at the time. Yeah. They were the first batch to leave, and we were planning to go. And then my father had it, because my father was in the First War. My father joined the First War in 1965 up to 72. So when he had people organizing, Ajongo was already in, my two other elder brothers were already in, my younger brother who is a chief now was already in, and he was going to go. He came and said, you need to finish your education. So
Ajongo, who your late brother, who was the chief of staff, and he served in the army. He already joined.
He already joined.
And then you have another brother who joined also.
My younger brother, who is now the chief behind me, was there. My two other brothers, who are older than Ajongo, were already in.
So the whole family was in the movement. Was that by choice or what?
I think it has something to do with the history, because in the family, the same thing happened in the First War in 1960s. My father was the first to leave in our area. He left with his siblings and his brother, because being the son of a chief by the time himself, he joined the movement in 1965 with about 12 of them.
Wow!
From the same family. 12 of them. That was in 1965, before we were born.
So the whole idea of the service and joining the movement predates even your birth.
Something in the DNA.
So then all of them leave. Majority of them leave, and your dad says you should go to school.
My dad came to WOW, and he told me you have to go to Khartoum. He actually tricked me. He told me you're going to Khartoum for holiday. Yeah. Then you will come back when the school opens. And he calls my nephew, which is his nephew, Captain David Martin, the pilot, who was already flying in Khartoum, told him that, this boy is coming, but don't let him come back. And later on he told somebody, I want you to continue his education, because not all of us can go. He will finish his schools, because this rebellion will not end. It takes long. He does the same thing. He was giving reference to himself. When we joined in 1965, we thought it was going to be only 2-3 weeks or 1 year, and then we come back. But it took us 17 years. So I want him to go and finish his education. When he finishes, he will come and join. That's exactly what he did.
And you, by then, you actually wanted to join.
I wanted to leave.
Because joining...
Everybody was going.
So you had to be tricked to go to school.
Yes.
Now, that means your dad had really foreseen the future and wanted to
kind of.
And so you ended up in Khartoum.
I went to Khartoum. I spent like 3 months during period, and then I think it was in January. In April I was planning to come back. So now I went to my nephew, which is Captain David Martin, which I was putting up with. So it is now schools are opening in WOW. I have to go back. I got some money, bought jeans and then kind of shoes with a pocket, and then bought myself a radio. It's National Panasonic, because this was very important for the radio SPLA at the time. And then he looked at me and he laughed. I said, what happened? He said, no, you're not going to go back. Because your dad said you shouldn't be allowed to go back. And in fact, your transfer, all the letters were brought and they were given out to your auntie, which is my auntie Mera, who was a teacher. She was the one keeping the papers, even without telling me. So I went to her and said, now I know this is a conspiracy. You guys conspired to bring me here. He said, well, this is what your father said. I said, okay. If that's the case, and I was in the first year of high school now, I said, if that's the case, I'm not going to go to first year. I have to go to third year. I have to skip the class. Now again, the idea was to sit exams, school certificate, so that you come back again, join.
Yep.
Conditional, I said, I'm not going to go to school unless I'm taken to third year. And that's exactly what they did.
So they took you to third year?
Yeah, so Auntie Mary went to headmasters at the time, Ustaz Led Garangaleo. So this is my nephew and I know him. I think if you want to go to third year, he doesn't want to go to second year. But if you want to give him a test so that he goes to third year, if he fails, that will be him. So the headmaster looks at me and said, what? Since he's insisting to go, let him go. You call and the teacher said, look for the class. That was, I remember William, that was Central State of Jazeera, Rufaa. So
yeah, Rufaa. That is Rufaa, the
Central States.
The Central State.
Yeah.
Was it a boarding school by then?
It was a boarding school.
And
it was dedicated for South Sudanese.
And I understand it. The Sheikh Lutfi school,
Lutfi,
and
yeah.
it's very famous for bringing generations of South Sudanese.
A lot of people. Actually, I think Rufaa would rank, if not on equal footing with Rumbek, will be the second to Rumbek in terms of number of students who went there, who are now prominent key members in our institutions. So
it is Rufaa is an oxymoron by itself because it exists in this small and it's small, and which is it's surrounded by Muslims and Arabs.
It is,
and predominantly dominated by Khalwas and all these things. And then you have this group of South Sudanese all studying here, and not only studying but living there.
Yes.
And at a time where there is conflict, there is what conditions made for such a space to exist?
Sudanese are very interesting. There is some sort of dichotomy of the Sudanese personality. Throughout the war, when the war was fighting, we were fighting in the north, in the south. There are very rare cases of incidents between South Sudanese and Northern Sudanese as a result of what was happening in the south. But particularly about this Rufaa, Rufaa was actually owned by a family. That's Sheikh Lutfi.
Yeah, Sheikh
Abdullah Lutfi.
Yeah.
But in 1971, one of the failed coups in Sudan, Nemeri butchered people in the central states, including the headmasters of that school. So the owner of the school actually closed the school.
So he closed the school?
Closed the school. From that time until 1985, when Nemeri was overthrown, then this idea came over South Sudanese who are in the north and they need to be schooled. Some were going to displace the school, some were being distributed across, but an idea came up during late Ustaz Nafan al-Naikur, was one of the leading teachers at the time, and during the interim arrangements were Dahab.
Yeah.
And it was decided that why don't you, this family offered that if they are looking for a school where South Sudanese should be accommodated, they offered the school for South Sudanese students.
So they offered the school for the students.
In 1995. So the first group, South Sudanese who were in Khartoum, who did not find time to go to schools, were taken in.
Yeah.
But now later on it became organized. So it became dedicated for South Sudanese. So all South Sudanese used to go there, distinctly South Sudanese. So this is how Rufaa came from 1985 until...
So it also, in a sense, it's a statement of it's a statement of a revolutionary, like there was a massacre, there was oppression, but now we are offering this.
Yes.
And and for context, like a lot of people studied there, the school existed, a lot of South Sudanese leaders, cadres came from that place. So you go there for a boarding school. You spent how many years there?
I spent a year because I went in, I went third year. So I spent a year, and I set student school certificate.
And you passed despite the fact that you jumped 2 years earlier on, or what? And then from then, what were the options?
The options were, I applied. I went to the university now. I actually applied to a number of schools, but again, the idea of doing law was always still there. It was my option. The key option was at the time Jamajuba did not have law school. Khartoum University, the competition was so high. And I applied. I wanted to go to Egypt, but I said, no, I don't want to leave Sudan now because a lot of issues were being done. A lot of activities, student activities, and at the level of Japa Demokratia, which was a Democratic Front. It was one of the organizations that actually took in a number of South Sudanese, when things became tough, crackdown, arrests, and all these things. So that was a big umbrella, including Northern Sudanese, which basically was I could say this, basically was a communist party. But under that umbrella, you had quite a number of South Sudanese who were, because the communists was in a way sympathetic and supportive of the movement, the ideals and the vision of the new Sudan.